how the system learned to survive anything. It didn't become stronger overnight. It became adaptable, and adaptability changed everything. To understand how the system learned to survive anything, we need to look at what repeated crises actually taught American banking. Each shock delivered the same lesson. Survival mattered more than elegance. Flexibility mattered more than purity. The goal was no longer to avoid stress, but to endure it. Today's system is not built for calm conditions. It is built for disruption. Capital buffers anticipate losses. Liquidity lines assume sudden withdrawal. Emergency tools stand ready before they are needed. Survival has been engineered into structure. This mindset emerged gradually. Early crises were treated as failures. Later ones were treated as tests. Each test refined the system's response. Weak points were reinforced. Processes were accelerated. Coordination improved. What changed most was expectation. Crises stopped feeling like existential threats. They became scenarios to manage. Stress was no longer exceptional. It was assumed. That shift transformed banking culture. Decision-making prioritized resilience over restraint. Growth continued, but with contingency always in mind. The system stopped asking whether it could survive disruption. It asked how fast it could respond. And once survival became the primary objective, everything else reorganized around it. As survival became the guiding principle, the system embraced redundancy. Multiple safeguards overlapped. Backups existed for backups. No single failure was allowed to cascade unchecked. What once looked inefficient became essential. Banks held more capital than seemed necessary. Liquidity was positioned across channels. Stress tests expanded in scope and severity. Scenarios imagined events that once felt implausible. Preparedness replaced prevention. This approach delivered results. Shocks were absorbed faster. Markets reopened sooner. Confidence returned more quickly. The system demonstrated an ability to bend without breaking. Survival became measurable, but this resilience came with trade-offs. Resources were tied up in buffers instead of productivity. Complexity increased. Transparency decreased. Understanding the full system required navigating layers of contingency. Regulators adapted alongside institutions. Coordination improved. Communication sharpened. Emergency frameworks were refined and rehearsed. Crises became managed exercises rather than uncontrolled events. This created a new normal. Stability was not the absence of stress. It was the ability to function through it. The system learned how to stay standing, even when conditions deteriorated. What it did not learn was how to simplify. Survival favored accumulation. Every crisis added structure. Nothing was removed. The system grew heavier, but harder to topple. The conflict emerged when survival itself became the system's blind spot. A structure built to endure anything begins to accept everything. Stress is absorbed. Signals are muted. Pain is deferred rather than resolved. As resilience increased, feedback weakened. Losses no longer forced immediate correction. Mistakes were contained instead of exposed. The system survived, but learning slowed. Survival replaced adaptation as the dominant goal. This created a subtle tension. A system optimized for endurance resists change. Removing safeguards feels dangerous. Simplifying feels reckless. Every layer exists for a reason tied to a past shock. Letting go feels like inviting the next crisis. Innovation adjusted accordingly. New products were designed to fit within existing buffers. New risks were structured to appear manageable. Creativity shifted toward compatibility rather than transformation. The system evolved, but within tight boundaries. The emotional peak arrives with a realization. A system that can survive anything may struggle to improve anything. When failure is off the table, urgency fades. Pressure that once drove reform is absorbed by design. This does not mean collapse is imminent. It means stagnation becomes possible. Stability hardens. Flexibility narrows. The system remains standing, but movement slows. Survival succeeded, but success created a new question. Can a system built to endure also learn how to change deliberately? The climax arrives with a quiet contradiction. A system designed to survive anything now struggles to imagine change. Stability has been perfected. Endurance has been engineered. But direction has become harder to define. When survival is guaranteed, urgency fades. Pressure that once forced reform is absorbed by buffers and safeguards. Problems no longer explode. They persist. The system continues forward, carrying unresolved questions without being forced to answer them. The resolution is reflective rather than triumphant. American banking has achieved something remarkable. It has learned how to endure shock after shock without collapsing. Confidence is restored faster. Panic is contained earlier. Continuity is preserved. But endurance is not the same as progress. A system that can withstand every storm may still drift off course. Survival protects the present. It does not automatically improve the future. Today, the banking system stands resilient, layered, and adaptive. It is harder to break than ever before. Yet its greatest challenge may no longer be collapse, but evolution. Knowing when to change, not because crisis demands it, but because growth requires it. What began as a fight to survive reshaped every rule, incentive, and expectation. And now, the system faces its most subtle test, whether it can move forward without being pushed by disaster. That test has no clear past condition, no stress scenario that can verify the outcome in advance. It is not a test of strength. It is a test of intention, of whether the people inside the system can agree on a direction without the focusing force of imminent collapse to align them. Crisis is, in a strange way, easy. It provides clarity. Everyone agrees on the goal: stop the bleeding, restore confidence, get back to functioning. The tools are clear. The metrics are legible. The urgency is shared. Deliberate change during stability is harder in every dimension. The goal is contested. The metrics are disputed. The urgency is absent. And the people who would benefit from change are not yet visible to those who would bear its costs. This is why systems that learn to survive anything often struggle to improve anything. Not because survival made them weak, because survival removed the only forcing function that reliably overcame the coordination problems that keep institutions doing what they have always done. The forcing function was crisis, and the system got very good at preventing it, which means it also prevented the clarity that crisis once delivered, and that is both its greatest achievement and its most subtle remaining vulnerability. A system that can survive anything must now learn to improve something without waiting to be forced. That is the work of the next era, not designing for survival, but designing for direction, choosing what the system is for, instead of only knowing what it is against. And that work begins not with a new tool or a new rule, but with a question, an honest one, asked by people who have the power to answer it. So what do you think? Has survival made the system stronger or simply harder to change? The answer, most likely, is both. Stronger in the dimensions that survival demanded, harder to change in the dimensions that survival never tested. That is not a contradiction. It is an accurate description of what optimization produces. A system exquisitely tuned to the pressures it has faced, and largely blind to the pressures it is not. The blindness is not negligence. It is a natural result of attention following threat. And when the threats are always the same, attention always faces the same direction. What lies behind the system, in the spaces where survival never looked, is where the next challenge is forming. Quietly, without urgency, without the clear signal that crises once provided, waiting for someone to turn around and look at what has been growing in the direction nobody was watching. That is the real question the system has not yet learned to ask. Not how to survive the next shock, but how to notice the thing that will become one before the noticing has already come too late. The system learned to survive anything. The next lesson is harder, learning to see what survival prevents you from needing to face, until one day you face anyway. And the system that had learned to survive anything discovers there is always something new it has not yet prepared for. That discovery is not failure. It is how every era of resilience eventually meets its next test, and how every generation of decision makers inherits the work of defining what survival is actually for, how the